Oh, I
Okay.
guess that's the host.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it made me the host, so I just press record.
Well,
Oh,
bless your heart.
okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Suzette Chang. I am the founder and CEO of Thick Descriptions, where we disrupt traditional educational methods with anthropology, building stronger communities. This is our monthly podcast, Elephant in the Room Unboxed. And we are grateful to be in partnership with Respect for Diversity Foundation. And I am very excited to have this amazing and cool young lady on with me today. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself, and then we're going to get uncomfortable as we usually do.
Mm.
So please introduce yourself.
Yes. Well, hello, everyone. I am Brendane Tynes. I usually introduce myself as a Gemini, a spiritual healer, an anthropologist, a reluctant anthropologist at that, someone who comes to anthropology with the knowledge of the history of the discipline as one that could be oppressive, but now we use to liberate Black people and other oppressed peoples. And I'm also, let's see, what else? A tarot reader. Let's just throw that fact out there
Oh,
about me
wow.
today.
Nice. That's pretty cool. Okay. Just a couple of months ago, Lawrence, we had someone that was a tarot reader. Kyle. That's right. That's right. That's
Oh.
very cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
I'm
Wow.
also a hoodoo, so in case folks have seen Sinners and they're interested in learning more about that, I also do hoodoo.
Okay. So much to talk about. We're definitely going to delve into that. So you and I met, has it been a year? It hasn't been a year.
No, we met it's been about 6 months, I'll
There
say.
we go. There
Mhm.
we go. There we go. As right before we started recording, I asked how you were doing, and you said the world is spinning. And so that may be my language for the balance of the day. And I say that because my ability to distinguish time and space today has been a little challenged. So, yeah.
Mhm.
So, about 6 months ago, we met. And a reason we met is because we're both anthropologists. Another reason we connected probably is our ethnicity, our gender, and learning how to navigate in different spaces with those specific categories that either we accept and or they are assigned to us.
Yes.
Yeah, and that in itself is a conversation of shifting power dynamics of what do you accept and what do you allow people to give you. And
Mhm.
some people that you don't even allow them, they just give it and stamp it, and in their mind that's the beginning and end. But
Mhm.
that's a whole nother conversation. So yeah.
Yes, so many.
Yes. Oh, and that's right. In addition, you have a podcast.
Yes.
Okay. And so go ahead.
I was going to say, yes, I am the host and producer of Black Loved Free, a spiritual political podcast that finds itself at the intersection of Black and African Indigenous spirituality, Black feminist political theory, and we learn a lot about Black liberation struggles on there too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Yes. And so you are on the East Coast,
Yes, Maryland.
Maryland. And is Maryland your home, native home?
No, I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. I
Okay.
moved to Baltimore in 2020. The pollen here is attacking me today, so
Mm.
I'm not sure how it is in Oklahoma, but here the pollen is out and about. It's coming creaking in through every crevice.
Yeah. Yeah. We can definitely relate. We have a variety of pollens here, plural, and it is tornado season. So, yeah,
Oh.
we've had quite a few. And I'm being sarcastic as I say this, lovely rainstorms in the last couple of weeks. To the point I was traveling this past weekend and sat for 5 hours in an airport because the delays due to the weather here in Oklahoma. So
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
it's just part of Oklahoma life. And it's very, and I think this is applicable for any space. There are some times where the inclement weather here is pretty severe. And then there are some times where it's just like, oh, it's quote unquote tornado season, but the tornadoes are limited yet almost non existent. But yeah,
Mm,
it's just, I'm convinced that Mother Nature is pissed, regardless of where you are. And
right.
if it doesn't hit you now, she'll hit you later. So yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. I agree with that.
So how did you become interested in anthropology?
Anthropology came to me in my sophomore year of college. I had no
Okay.
clue what it was before going to college. I grew up in a poor family in South Carolina. I was the first person in my family to even go to college. And all we knew was you could be a doctor or a lawyer. Those were the only two options for people who got their higher education. And so I
Okay.
met Dr. Lee Baker, who is an anthropologist of history and anthropologist of race. And he taught me that race is something that is socially constructed, which means that people made it up way back in
Right.
the day to justify all different forms of inequality.
Correct.
And when I learned that, it really made my experiences growing up as a Black girl in South Carolina make so much sense. I was like,
Mm,
why is it that I only know other Black people? I only live near other Black people. Everyone around me is poor except for the white kids in class in my, honors and AP classes.
mm,
And it really, I don't know, I thought the world was fixed, but I was really troubled by it. And it wasn't
mm,
until I encountered anthropology that I learned that we could change the world. And so that
mhm.
is why I became an anthropologist, in short.
Wow. 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 Any, if you had to do your educational experience again, what would you do different if you could?
Hmm. That's a great question. I think I would have abandoned being pre-med a lot earlier. So
Ah,
I came into college wanting to be a pediatrician, and then I started taking science classes while I was taking anthropology classes. And I wish I would have taken more anthropology, more of Black studies that we had at my college instead of taking organic chemistry and and physics. And I think if I had opened myself up to the possibility of being able to support myself outside of that dream of being a medical doctor earlier, I would have just
got it.
learned so much more.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Yeah, I will say in my time, 10 plus years of being a practicing anthropologist, specifically here in Oklahoma, seeing other anthropologists that look like me,
Mm,
not just from an ethnicity perspective, also from a gender and having a desire slash commitment to practice it is limited. So when I saw you, it was like, oh my gosh, there's someone that looks like me, and they're
yeah.
an anthropologist. Um, very cool, very cool. So wanted to have had the privilege of looking at your CV. Very impressive, doctor. When did you receive that title?
I officially became Dr. Brendane Erica Tynes in 2023. My degree
Okay,
got mailed to me October 2023, but I defended in August of 2023. So that's when I count my anniversary. So I'll be 2 years
nice.
in August.
Nice, nice, nice. And so, what is your desire or plan to do with this powerful piece of paper?
Wow. I was literally thinking about this morning. Um, right now I work at a foundation that funds anthropological research.
Mhm.
I have been a postdoc doing research and writing. Um, My long-term goal is to work for myself, to do kind of lead a think tank of Black feminist writers, thinkers. Not all of us have to have a PhD because I don't subscribe to that idea. I think good research can come from anyone. And so my ultimate dream is to lead that think tank, to work for myself. But I think right now I'm still looking for the pathway to that because I don't
Okay.
come from wealth. And so I feel like I have to work until I can have enough to work for myself, I think.
Understood. Understood. You just said something that really caught my attention. A Black feminist. What is the difference between a Black feminist and a womanist?
Mm. So I would say womanism is a term that's coined by the author Alice Walker.
Yes.
She really was thinking about feminism and its roots in outside of Black traditions, I would say, where they disregarded folks who had anybody who had any kind of male identity in their communities. That kind of feminism was very fragmented. It would break communities apart. It was very anti-men. And for Alice Walker, who saw the potential and power in Black men and boys and being in community with them, she felt that womanism was the better approach, the way to take feminist notions that recognize women as human beings, recognize women as people who contribute to society outside of childbearing and other things, for us to be able to work together towards having a more equal and equitable society. And womanism
Mhm.
also has connections and ties to Christianity. There are a lot of folks
Mm.
who are Christians, who are pastors, who are women, who are also womanists as well.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So let's shift slightly, but I think what we've talked about has definitely created a wonderful platform. Thick Descriptions is very committed to education for youth to seasoned adults.
Mm,
Um, the United States is definitely in an educational crisis from a
absolutely.
variety of perspectives. And one of those issues is the limited tools and or execution of critical thinking,
Mm,
which I would argue personally and professionally, anthropology is a wonderful tool to exercise critical thinking. And I see you doing the snaps.
yes,
So
I'm
talk.
snapping. I'm like, yes,
Okay, okay,
absolutely.
okay. So
Yes.
elaborate on those snaps, please.
I think to speak to what you're saying about the attack on critical thinking, I think this is an attack that we can see has a long history that for me, I kind of seeded in the emancipation of enslaved peoples and their thirst and desire and drive to educate themselves by any means necessary. Like my ancestors, our ancestors built schools and trained teachers. These were
Mhm,
in a generation, there were more readers of African descent on this continent than there were of like poor white people who were able to
mhm,
read. And so I think we're in over a century's fight, right, to fight against what what those who desire to oppress see as, as oh, we give them the tools to learn. They build
mhm,
societies in which we are not in supreme power anymore. And so
mhm,
the attack on critical thinking, I think, is not just about, having students be dependent on their phones or having people be dependent on certain things. It's really about having power and control over people's lives and the possibilities and opportunities they have. And
mhm,
so with anthropology, I think what this discipline can allow for folks to do is to see the world and not see it as natural, but
mhm,
actually question what folks tell you when you see a news article or you might see something that's AI, you question, where does this come from? Who makes this? Who's interacting with it? How are they
mhm,
interacting with it? And these are
Mhm.
all questions that anthropologists seek to answer. And that critical thinking, I think, is what makes, because we've seen some bad anthropology. I'm sure you've seen some bad anthropology, Suzette, where people were not asking the right questions. But I think good anthropology is always asking questions and is always trying to trouble what we assume to be normal or assume
Right,
to be right or wrong.
right, right, right. And as anthropologists, you and I both understand, I want to lean into what you just said, that there's this assumption that my way is the only way. And that's
Hmm.
obviously a cultural perspective. Um, a big thing that is said here in Oklahoma, and I would probably argue in many other spaces, is we've always done it this way. And
Mm,
so there's this belief that because at some point in time it worked for a group in a time and space means that it would work for all groups presently, not incorporating the influence of uh, our modern technologies from you just said AI and phones and all of those things. They are fairly new, and so each time, if you look over American history specifically, each time our technology shifts, there needs to be a shift.
mhm,
um, and that's just one component of the need to pivot, which a huge part of critical thinking is stepping back and looking at what worked before and what is working now.
mm.
Um, so want to pivot again to you. You said your educational experiences, and so you grew up where again?
In South Carolina.
South Carolina. It sounds as though you were the only, if not a few, of melanated humans at that time.
Yes, in my high school, I talk,
Mm-hmm,
most of my schools were majority black because of where I
mm-hmm,
lived.
mm-hmm,
But in all of the advanced classes, it was all
mm-hmm,
white kids, and I would be maybe one of four melanated
mm-hmm,
folks. And
mm-hmm,
we, at the time, I didn't even really recognize that it was just me. And it wasn't until I got to high school where I was in like science classes or math classes, and it's you look around and you're like, okay, it's just me and maybe my friend in calculus, maybe it's just me and maybe my friend in biology.
mm-hmm,
Um, and it really became apparent when all of the kind of magnet students, we were applying to college, and I was the only person who got into, I went to Duke University for my undergrad. I was the only person who got into Duke University. And, the white girls in my class were just like, how did they let you in? How did they do that? How did you do that? And I was like, what do you
mm-hmm.
mean? I'm in the same
Oh
class as you
wow.
are.
Right,
Like,
right. And just so you know, I think we're having some instability network issues. I'm confident it's not on your end. But I was able to hear, were you able to pick that up, Lawrence? Okay. Um, and so the good news is they were comfortable asking you that question because in my opinion, it let you know where their head is. The
mm-hmm,
pause is how they asked that question, um, and what it insinuated.
mm-hmm.
Um, and you said this was during high school for you.
Yes, it was like my senior year of high school when I really started to see that racism wasn't just something that my family experienced kind of in institutions, but just like person to person. It was one of the first times that I really had a classmate express something that was about me being black, and her assumptions that she deserved more than me or better than me because
Mhm,
of that. And that
mhm,
was hard. That was hard to hear.
mhm, mhm, mhm. And I, just based on the language you just offered, it suggests that she had no discomfort asking you that.
Oh no, none.
Yeah,
It was almost
yeah.
like a kind of disgust, or it's like a surprise with a mix of disgust with just
Mhm,
like. And so she ended after she went through all of her, I don't understand this, that, and the, oh well, it must have been some kind of mistake or maybe they let you in. Is there some special scholarship you have or something? Um, yeah, and I was like, how do 17-year-olds know to blame affirmative action? I don't know, but that is, I guess, that goes to show, I think, just thinking about what you said about Oklahoma and how folks talk about this is how things were, this is how we just do things. I think even young folks in South Carolina who may have interactions with people of many different races and ethnicities still can look or rely on this old history of discrimination, and when they're like with their classmates and how they treat each other.
Mhm. Yeah, those, and although I'm disappointed that that's part of your experience, and I've had similar when I was much younger, and actually have experienced it in the last 30 days, which was like, we're still doing this, huh?
What?
Yeah, and we could definitely talk about that. Giving it language, i.e., microaggressions or micro assaults.
Mm,
Um, they can be very piercing and hurtful. And the issue of intent and impact, and understanding that although, let's say for argument's sake, that young lady, her intentions were genuine, there was no thought of how it would impact you.
mhm,
Um, but where I'm going with all of this is, and it ties back to me personally and professionally, is the need for critical thinking, the need to not only see ourselves as humans, to see ourselves as humans with different experiences. And
mm,
collectively, the good news is that there are many human beings now that are intentionally looking to understand other people's experiences due to ethnicity, gender, race, class, all the social constructs that have been created by anthropologists, I might say.
yeah.
Um, um, and understanding at the beginning and end of the day that we're all human beings. And so I know for me personally and professionally, I pivot back and forth to that. We are a visual society.
Mhm,
I see myself as an educator, not a teacher. Um, and as an educator, me just being moving in the spaces that I move in, and we are a visual society. And if I'm rocking this cowboy hat, or doing whatever I'm doing, it tends to draw attention, not necessarily in a negative or positive, but it definitely is like, oh. And so, based on what people see, there is a desire, if not a commitment, in my opinion, sometimes to put me in a box
mm,
based on their
yes.
own cultural lenses. So, how do you pivot between being a human being and your experiences?
Mm. I really like how you said you encounter others who try to put you into this box, and that is where they operate from in their understanding of you. And in the workshops that I do, when I'm talking about race, I'm talking about race as a social construct and identity. I tell people, identity is not inherent. It is a label or a set of labels that are put upon you so that folks know or get an idea, right, of how you might experience oppression. And so for me, the label Black is not necessarily something that's inherent to who I am,
Mhm.
right? But it is an understanding of a way that histories of oppression have shaped my life. And so when I try to pivot, or when I pivot from being Brendane, who wakes up at 5:30 in the morning and does her meditations, to Brendane, the anthropologist in front of
Mhm.
Zoom at 10 a.m. in my
Mhm.
meetings, I'm constantly
Mhm.
carrying all of these different, I guess we could call them boxes. And I'm like, okay, which
Mhm.
one might I have to kind of maneuver in or create more room for myself in,
Mhm.
today and in my interactions with others? I do find that when I'm in spaces with other people who share my ethnicity, who might share my gender identity, that the box gets a lot more roomier. But then there are moments where, we have those boxy moments where people are like, like I've had folks say to me, I didn't expect for you with this education and this background to like enjoy there's this rapper, Megan Thee Stallion. I love Megan Thee Stallion. Like I didn't
Okay.
expect for you to enjoy Megan Thee Stallion. And I'm like, well, what are your assumptions about someone who has a PhD? Like, do you think that we don't listen to good music? Like what?
Right, 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 right,
I think
right.
so much of the pivot for me is about asking people questions about why
Mhm,
they run to put the box on you. When and like if they recognize the
mhm.
box that's on them too, because maybe we can both work to let these
Right,
boxes go in these spaces.
right, right. And it is, in my opinion, taking that approach of pulling back the layers of social constructs, historical impacts, language, biology, all of those things, peeling back those layers to see our humanity. And within those layers, we tend to put people in boxes
Hmm.
um, based on our own cultural lenses. And you just said something that has definitely expanded my perspective. So I'm accustomed to pivoting and shifting to ensure that what I say and that it is heard,
Mm,
not the visual. And so there have been times like right now I have on a hat. I'm enjoying it. I have braids on underneath. When I allow my braids to be shown in different spaces, the attention goes to the braids
mm,
versus what's coming out of my mouth,
mm,
or the attention might go to the hat. Um, and so you've just identified or just shared something that I will definitely incorporate is when I know people are putting me in a box and they are joining that box with me of us figuring out ways to remove, if not diminish that box.
mhm,
Um, I am was born by, raised by boomers in the silent uh, generation, and so it's very much this sense of survival and
mm,
self-sufficiency. And what you are speaking of is a reminder of collectiveness, which if in any time in our history, we've got to work together now. We really
mm.
do. And we definitely do better when we work together. Very powerful. I just have an aha moment. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank
I love your hat too. It's nice. The braids are also nice, and I think people's fascination with our hair is there's such a long history of that. I have locks. I have sister locks. So people, when they meet me, if they're black, they usually want to touch my hair. They usually want to touch
you.
my hair. They might not ask me first before they do it. And what I find interesting when my hair is locked as opposed to loose and natural or even in braids, that a lot of non-black people or even non-melanated people don't say anything to me about it. They don't ask me about my hair at all. Locks only tend to fascinate folks who share my race or ethnicity background. I find that to be really interesting, but I always
Mhm.
I always try to push people to think like if you are trying to tamp me or enclose me in this box, you can only see my box through the little slats or holes in your own, right? Like you
Mhm.
are seeing a very limited view of me from where
Mhm.
you are and the things that kind of encage you. So let's work together
Mhm.
because these none of these boxes serve us or serve the core of who
Agreed.
we are.
Agreed. And see, to me, it's not only do I agree with you that they don't serve us, they, well, let me say it differently. I hear you. I believe they serve us to a certain extent if we use them as a tool. To me, it's a
Mm,
great way to start to
mm,
have a better understanding of this human being that may identify as African American and female, and in my case, Oklahoman, and so on and so forth. Because there are, to all those labels slash identities, there's layers, there's thick descriptions in it. There
mm,
is content and context that needs to be peeled away, and that takes time. It takes energy. It takes deliberate intention with a desire to have a truer and better understanding of someone who may or may not have your experiences. At the same time, we're all human beings.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things that go across the board for human beings that identify as female and human beings that identify as male. And then there are just some things that go across the board because we are human beings. We all need a place to stay. We all need a roof over our head, clothes on our back, and food in our stomach, quality education, and good health care. That's just like basic 101 stuff that is not afforded to all human beings, regardless if you live in the United States or not.
Mm. And I think these are the things that so many folks get stuck on, that starting point. They get stuck on the different labels, the different identities that they're not willing to move past. And I think even what we were talking about earlier with the fight against critical thinking and
Right. Right.
education, it's the push to get people to feel like there's no need to move past the visual. There's no need to move
Mhm,
past what you can
mhm,
easily identify. There's no need to question or spend that time. You could just see
mhm,
someone and immediately you know how to treat or mistreat them. Um,
mhm,
and I think what is wonderful about the work that you do is that you are providing ways for people to learn how to question, to learn how to push
mhm,
through and learn more
mhm,
about themselves, push past that
mhm.
box for themselves and
Right.
others.
And thank you for that. A component of pushing is just getting people comfortable to ask a question.
Hmm.
So here in Oklahoma and in many, Oklahoma is considered the Midwest, and in many Southern spaces, specifically for humans that identify as female, there's this expectation of being polite.
Mm,
And politeness is connected to Christianity and a variety of other um, manner, manners. Um, and part of manners historically is you don't ask questions.
hmm.
You just smile and grin and keep it pushing. Um, is politeness an issue or a focus where you live?
Absolutely. In Baltimore, Baltimore is named the Charm City, and it was
Oh wow.
renamed that in the early 2000s to combat the national image of Baltimore as a murder capital, as a place where the murder rate just continuously climbs, even though in the past 2 years the murder rate has declined considerably here. And
Mm-hmm,
so maybe the usefulness of the name Charm City
mm-hmm,
doesn't hold its same weight, but here the expectation is that you meet someone on the street and they are willing to help you. They're willing to guide you. They're willing to speak to you. And
okay.
coming from South Carolina, politeness is definitely an aspect
Mm-hmm,
of how I was
mm-hmm.
raised. And one thing I learned growing up in the South was that, what we say might sound good, but if you're really
Right.
listening, you're going to hear what we mean, right?
Right.
Like, bless
You
your
can hear the
heart.
start. Right, right,
Bless your heart might sound like a good prayer,
right,
but really
right.
what we're saying is that your heart needs a blessing. Like,
Yes, 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 yes. So I want to lean in probably will piggyback to back to education. You said something that really caught my attention. You are into voodoo.
mm,
Explain.
yes. So I am a Hoodoo practitioner, and Hoodoo
Voodoo, not
is,
voodoo.
oh yeah, the Vodun is a Haitian ancestral spiritual practice
Hmm.
that is very closed and very private. So Hoodoo is, I guess if I would explain it like Zora Neale Hurston in the
My
beginning
girl.
of yes, our girl, our girl Zora in the beginning of Mules and Men talks about how voodoo is the name that the quote unquote the white folk give all Black and African indigenous ancestral magic practices.
Mhm.
But we really see that as not as magic per se or magic TM, right? It's a
Mhm.
spiritual practice that allows us to maintain right relationship with the earth and with other
Mhm.
human beings. And so
Mhm.
Hoodoo for me is an ancestral practice that allows me to have more control and power in my life than what that box that people might try to fit me in as a
Mhm.
Black woman who's from a poor background, who's educated. Like Hoodoo
Mhm.
connects me to my ancestors, those of African descent, and some of my indigenous ancestors who are the Choctaw, who
Oh,
are in
wow.
Oklahoma
Okay.
and Mississippi,
Yes.
Louisiana.
Yes. Yes.
And so I use what I learned in Hoodoo to connect with my Black ancestors as well as my indigenous ancestors.
Nice. And is it something that you practice for you personally? Is it a business for you? Is it both?
That's a great question. I think right now I'm in the space of personal practice. I
Okay.
do tarot, which is not a Hoodoo practice, as a business. Like people can pay me to do a reading. And I also do Reiki or energy healing, which is not a
Mhm.
Hoodoo practice,
Mhm.
but I do that as kind of a business. But no, the Hoodoo stuff, like the root work, I don't have the license. I'll just put it that way. No one has
Okay.
sanctioned me to, go forth and do root work, and I don't want to. I don't want to like start practicing it without having that license
Okay.
or sanction,
Okay.
because just in case I don't
Okay.
want to mess my life up or nobody else's life up. Like honestly.
Understood. 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 So I'm going to pivot back to education from a public school perspective, and you definitely talked about some of your experiences. What do you think are some of the problems of the public school systems as a whole in the
Mm.
United States?
Oh, that is several books. I
Mhm.
I would say so I can speak from my time as a student, and I did teach high school science for a couple
Okay.
of years in a public
Okay.
school in Charlotte, between 2015 and 2017, so 10 years ago. And what I saw there, it was my first time really experiencing school not from the background of being a high achieving student, which was
Mhm.
important for me because
Mhm.
I think that my path as the oldest of my mother's three children, I'm the most educated. I'm the one that um, has the most kind of monetary. If you look, like I'm the one that's squarely in the middle class. And my brother and my sister had very different educational experiences than me. And my brother did not even graduate from high school, and he has been
Mhm.
incarcerated. He
Mhm.
is functionally illiterate, right? And I'm like at
Okay.
the opposite end of the spectrum, having a
Okay.
PhD. And so I think so much of his experience came from being a dark-skinned Black boy in schools in South Carolina who was seen as unruly, who was seen as just that child that just can't sit down. And
Mhm.
so years of that of really teachers refusing to reach him or teach him led him to grow into a man who is reliant upon the women around him to help him navigate the world, particularly when it comes to reading and writing and those kind of skills to function. And so when I saw that in the making, I think as a teacher, I had students who were 17, 18 years old who couldn't add single digit numbers. And this was 10 years ago. This was pre-COVID. This was pre the quote unquote brain drain that they
Mhm.
attribute to students not being in the classroom. These were students who had uninterrupted educations who couldn't tell me what an 88 plus 2 was, who got into debates with me about addition and subtraction and reading, because they didn't see the utility of it. They didn't see the usefulness of learning in school. They wanted to, and that's because they had teachers who didn't see them as people who were worth learning.
Right.
And so the biggest things that I see now as I follow other teachers on social media, and my nephews are in school now. I have 3 nephews who are in school, is there is still this deep, deep, deep entrenched racism that
Mhm.
prevents students, especially those who are in impoverished backgrounds, from learning at the same level as those who live in other parts of the city or whose parents pay taxes in different areas. And that inequality along the lines of race, that inequality along race and ethnicity, I would say, because there are Black people who aren't from the US who have different educational experiences.
Correct.
And then race and class and gender is it's even more stark now. And I think the loss of in-person instruction during COVID has contributed to that, but it's not the
Absolutely.
root of what we are seeing today. And in college, my friends who are professors are saying that they have students who are not able to write in complete sentences in
That
college.
is correct. That is correct. That is one of the biggest frustrations that I have heard from several of my professor friends is the disappointment of realizing that they have a freshman and or sophomore that cannot construct a paragraph. Um,
And they get frustrated when you ask them to. It's like
right,
a
right,
really sad. It's very
right,
sad.
right. Sad and disappointing, yes, and frustrating. Agreed. Agreed. If you could, if you were a teacher right now, what would you, and you were addressing or engaging those young minds that are struggling to, in high school, that are struggling to read and or write, how would you handle it?
Mm. Right now,
Mhm.
I'm thinking because even 10 years ago, the attention issues when it came to having a phone, having social media, the bullying on social media was a big issue, and now it's grown to be something that a lot of teachers find an obstacle that keeps them from teaching.
No.
So I think the Brendan in the classroom now would be hosting a lot of after school hours. And that was something that I did as a teacher. I had a lot of tutoring opportunities for students. And not to get too technical with it, but I would take the kind of teaching curriculum that we had and I would break it down and think about, okay, my students are testing, if they're in high school, they're testing at like a 6th and 7th grade level. What are the steps, the different steps that I have to take? What are the different pieces that they're missing that I have to include in the lesson for them to get up to a 10th and 11th grade level? And that's what a lot of what I had to do back then, but I think even more now because there is an assumption that because kids have access to computers in their hands, that they know things.
Right.
Um, and I would really try, I don't know, maybe I would try to think of something fun, like make a TikTok video about what we're doing, or just think
Yeah.
about how to get them. Because if they're going to be on TikTok anyway, like why not just,
Right. Right.
why not
Incorporate
incorporate
that
that more?
technology. Right. Right.
Um, and so I think I would just try to make it seem more fun while also just making sure they have those building blocks. And that that is so much work, so much more work than what teachers are paid for.
Agreed. Agreed. When you were a teacher, do you remember parental involvement?
Hmm.
Like, was there a PTA? Was there were your students supported by their parents?
There was no PTA at the school that I was at. It was an assumption that none of the students' parents had time for that. They're working or they're just not present. And like I think a lot of people assume by the time students get to high school that they don't need that kind of support as well.
Ooh,
Which is I would say arguably the opposite. Like if they're planning on
correct.
going to higher
And
education, they need more support from their parents.
agreed.
But and again, this was 10 years ago, but I really noticed
Mhm.
that so many parents were willing to cede their caretaking responsibility for their children to me. So many parents were willing to give up parenting to me. And that was astonishing because I was 22. I was 22. I was not much older than their kids
Mhm.
when I started teaching.
Mhm.
And a lot of parents, I would
Mhm.
call home and say, I'm going to use a fictional name here. Kevin is not doing his homework. Kevin has a 15% in my class. Kevin needs this class to graduate. And parents would say, well, you're the teacher. You figure out what to do about it. Okay. Um,
Yep.
and that was unfortunately the majority of the parents that I dealt with. There were a few of them who were very invested in their child's education and their child's growth as a student and as a person, and those were the students who went to college. And so it just made such a big difference, I think. And so many of the other students who
Mhm.
didn't have that support for whatever reason, they just ended up going to work or not really having any kind of security economically after because they were also
Right.
kicked out of their
Right.
childhood. Yeah. Mm.
Right. Yeah, as you reflect, and thank you for sharing your stories of over, well, almost 10 years ago or 10 years ago, uh, things that you experienced, and unfortunately, that is still the, it is still the issue.
Mm.
It,
No, am I frozen?
it has been compounded by the height of the pandemic and
Mm.
impacting our children's ability to think and thrive and be in um, education, that we use our antiquated incorporate critical thinking again to exercise that is so very necessary. Looking for people that critically think, opportunities to create those employers what it is they're looking for. Um, and just, basic 101, the ability to critically think empowers you to understand the ability to, or the necessity to negotiate salary.
Mm.
If
Yes.
you if you know your worth, you know your value, you can critically think and provide data and support of why. And I'm purposely using a low figure of, I'm not worth $2, I'm worth $5 an hour,
Hmm.
or whatever the case may be. Um, as we wrap up this podcast, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the
What do
invitation.
you want to Oh, you are welcome. What do you want to leave our listeners with as it relates to education and the future of our young minds?
Mm. There is, or there are so many misconceptions about who is responsible for us. And one thing that I think if we can learn from our ancestors' experience, we can learn from looking around us at what's happening now, is that now is the time for us to claim responsibility for ourselves. And not in the, okay, I'm going to claim responsibility and run to the polls and just leave it there with that official in DC or in the Capitol making those legislative decisions. No, I think it's time for us all to look at the power that we have within ourselves and within our communities and think about what is it that we want our kids to know? What do we want our students to learn? What kind of lives do we want them to know that they can have? And how can we live those every day? Because that's where I'm at. I think about my nephews
Mhm.
and I'm like, how can I show them? What books can I give them? What things can I say to them? What love and care can I show them right here, right now? So that when they grow old, they continue to build a world that loves them. And that's all I have to say about it. I think gone are the days where we can just wake up and expect for public education to give us everything we need.
Agreed. Agreed.
Unfortunately.
Before we wrap up, please share your podcast information
Yes.
again.
So, Black Loved Free, we are on Spotify, Apple, all the different platforms. Google doesn't exist anymore. I just found that out. Um, but you can find us there, or you can find us at blacklovedandfreepodcast.com. And we're also on Instagram at Black Loved and Free.
Cool. And say that again about Google.
Google Podcast is gone.
Uh,
They've
is
dissolved
it?
yeah. I'm not sure why. I
Google's
think
out the
they're
podcast game. Wow.
Spotify, yeah. I think they're trying to do something with Spotify. So, um,
Sure that's Spotify buying up everything.
Lauren
probably
said they're
it's probably
trying to buy,
Spotify
buy up
buying up.
everything. That's it. Yeah, they may be the Amazon of podcasts.
Hmm.
Yeah. My lady, thank you so much for your time. Really looking forward to staying connected with you.
Yes,
And you and I have talked about this. Not sure how or when, but it will happen.
yes. I plan to be in Oklahoma soon. I'm actually doing some research for the podcast about Black and Indigenous connections. And so the Choctaw are
Yes,
they were in centers. I said, "Oh, those are my ancestors." So they were in centers, and they are all up and through Black history and resistance. So
yes,
I will definitely reach out
yes.
to you when I'm out there. But this was such a pleasure, Suzette. Thank you.
Oh, most
This made my
definitely.
day.
Most definitely.
So
Good,
thank
good,
you.
good, good, good. All right. You please take care.
You too. Thank you. And thanks to
All
the
right.
sound engineer as well. Have a good
Yes,
day.
Lawrence, he is the man,
Thanks,
the sound
Lawrence.
engineer. He's waiting for me. Bye.
Bye.